and kindly ask the Commission to settle. Yeah, I'm waiting for you.
Please, Minister.
President, honourable members, Commissioner. Since our previous debate in July, the EU has continued its efforts to stabilise transatlantic trade. Our basic aim remains to create fair, clear and predictable conditions for transatlantic trade and supply chains. The joint statement sets a framework for our future work. It defines concrete steps for both sides. Notably, it gives EU companies a better position than other US trading partners. As you know, the Commission has proposed 2 legal measures concerning market access for US products. These measures are the first steps in the EU implementation of the July political deal. The Council has started the examination of the 2 proposals. We hope we can reach an agreement with the European Parliament that will benefit our businesses, workers and citizens. While working for a predictable framework for transatlantic trade, the Council will continue its efforts to deepen existing partnerships around the world. We have received the decisions on the signing and the conclusion of 2 landmark agreements: the EU-Mercosur Agreement, EU-Mercosur Partnership Agreement and the EU-Mexico Modernized Global Agreement. We count on your constructive cooperation so we can achieve our common objectives: to diversify trade and to fully deliver on European competitiveness and innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Minister. And now, please, Commissioner Šefčovič, do take the floor on behalf of the Commission. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Parliament. On the 27th of July at Turnberry, Europe faced a stark choice: risk of possible economic catastrophe or act to protect our economy. And we chose the latter, the only responsible option for our businesses and jobs. So this was not, as some have claimed, a capitulation or a sellout or no negotiations. Far from it. It was a choice of stability and predictability over uncertainty, escalation, and ultimately a trade war that would have benefited no one in Europe. And throughout these tough and demanding negotiations, our commitment to the EU values and its unique economic and social model has been unwavering. This model, including our regulatory autonomy, is not for sale, ever. And we stand ready to defend it, if need be, also with our trade instruments. So the choice we have made was, and still is, in our best interests. After spending hundreds of hours talking to my counterparts, I can tell you with clarity the US is convinced that it needs to change the terms of its trade with the rest of the world. Our vision is different, but the world as we knew it will not come back, and nostalgia will not help us adapt to new reality. Making this deal is the right move for the European Union for 4 reasons. First, by reaching an agreement with the United States, Europe avoided tariffs on our exports of 30 to 50%. This would have had a severe impact on our farmers, our car makers, our manufacturers, and our citizens. It would have severely damaged our political partnership and economic relations with the US, affecting 1.7 trillion euros of trade every year, 5 trillion euros in investment on both sides of the Atlantic, and 5.7 million jobs that depend on EU-US trade. To be honest, I didn't hear many in politics, maybe until this morning, and no one in the industry arguing that we should put this at risk, particularly not with the war still raging on the European continent. And ultimately, we secured the best deal possible. Second, this agreement provides more stability and predictability, vital for EU businesses suffering from volatility and uncertainty. And third, the deal helps ensure access for European products to the US markets on competitive terms, in particular compared to imports from other countries. And finally, the deal provides the opportunity to move beyond recent tensions. It creates a platform for more positive engagement with the US, with a roadmap for expanding market access and deepening our trade and investment relationship. And given these factors, I believe that when we ask ourselves whether the EU is better off with this deal than without it, there is only one answer. And I am convinced that it is the right political decision for the EU now to follow through and implement this deal. Honourable members, I was doing my best to keep you abreast of all key developments over the past month. As for the next steps, the Commission has already followed through on our commitment to introduce legislation allowing for lowering of tariffs on certain products in line with the joint statement. We have presented to you two legislative proposals, one covering bilateral reductions of tariffs for all industrial products and some non-sensitive agriculture and fisheries products. The other relates to prolonging the so-called EU-US lobster deal. They are now in the hands of this House and the Council. We therefore stand at a crucial democratic moment. I have heard the criticism that some of you have expressed, but we now need to make the politically responsible choice and take the necessary steps to move our relationship with the US forward. I ask you for your support and assure you that the Commission stands ready to assist and find constructive solutions. At the same time, we have to ensure that the US honours its obligation under the deal as well. As a first step, on the 31st of July, the US issued an executive order confirming the implementation on the 7th of August of a single, all-inclusive 15% tariff on imports of goods from the EU. On the 5th of September, another executive order was signed enabling Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick and US Trade Representative Jameson Greer to implement the tariff reductions and exemptions in the deal. And I welcome the confirmation by Secretary Lutnick on Monday that the US will implement these commitments by reducing tariffs on car and car parts from 27.5% to 15% retroactively from the 1st of August, crucial for the competitiveness of our car sector. It means savings of more than 500 million euros each month in duties. Similarly, I welcome the confirmation that the US will apply retroactively as of 1st of September exemptions from duties for various sectors, including aircraft and components, generic pharmaceuticals, active ingredients, some chemical and agricultural products, and natural resources and other key inputs. We will also work with the US to expand the number of sectors that are exempted from the 15% tariff, including wines, spirit, medical devices, and more. We are seeking to kickstart work with the US on ring-fencing our economies from overcapacity and ensuring that EU exports of steel and aluminium to the US benefit from the tariff rate quota. And I have heard your concerns regarding the expansion of the derivative lists, and I have raised this with my US counterparts, and I will continue doing so until we resolve this issue. Let me emphasize, however, that our draft legislation includes safeguards to ensure that we can suspend our tariff liberalisation in part or in full should the US not respect the terms of the deal. And I want to assure you that I will continue our established practice and keep this House fully informed about and involved in the work to implement the joint statement. I want to finish, Mr. President, by considering the broader context of our global trade relations. After all, the US is not the only game in town. In 2024, the US represented very important, but 17% of our total trade. But we also need to take care of the other 83%. That means continuing our efforts to diversify our trade relations. So we are pushing an ambitious and pragmatic free trade agreement agenda to expand our trade, diversify our supply chains, and offer our companies new export markets. A week ago, I was proud to present the final text for the deals with Mercosur and Mexico. The EU-Mercosur partnership will create a market of over 700 million people with a tariff savings over 4 billion euros a year. And the EU exports to Mercosur countries expected to surge by 39% by 2040. Mexico is our second largest trading partner in Latin America, a net food importer, and one of our top suppliers of the critical raw materials. Elsewhere, President von der Leyen and Indonesian President Prabowo announced in July a political agreement to conclude an FTA this September. I will be travelling to Indonesia later this month with you doing just that. Before that, I will also visit India, where we aim to conclude negotiations on our FTA still in 2025. We will also move ahead with our other ongoing negotiations, such as those with Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, United Arab Emirates and Australia. We are also working towards structured collaboration with our partners in the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, now under the abbreviation CPTPP. Finally, but no least, our support for the multilateral trading system and the WTO remains unwavering, and we want to work together with the like-minded partners to reform it. So we need to proceed with determination, courage, and strong political will to protect our interests in a volatile global environment. The deal with the US restores stability and predictability with our #1 trade and investment partner and a key ally, ensuring a platform from which we can take discussions forward. As we progress with our global FTA agenda, we will be working with you very, very closely in all these negotiations. And at this stage, I would like to thank you for your kind attention, and I'm very much looking forward to your questions and interventions. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Commissioner. And to start a debate, I would like to give the floor to colleague Warbon, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, Minister, Commissioner. We are indeed living in very uncertain times. We have war on our continent, and unfortunately, we still need US for security reasons. Therefore, I think it would be very responsible to also enter into a trade war with the US at this time. This deal is not perfect. I don't particularly like the outcome of this deal. But I think the most responsible thing to do at this moment is to go through with the deal and then continue to negotiate. I know there are groups or MEPs in this chamber that would like to escalate the situation and then continue to negotiate. I don't think that will have the best outcomes for Europeans. So it's not a perfect deal, but it's a deal that we have on the table, and we have security reasons for adopting the deal. We have to change it a bit, though. Of course, we are not voting on the deal as such. We will be voting on the two legislative proposals that the Commissioner mentioned. and we will certainly have to amend it in order to make sure, not least, that it is fully compatible with WTO rules. And I have mentioned several times in this chamber and to the Commission that I'm not certain it does. I'm rather quite certain that it doesn't. But I think, colleagues, we in this House, we could fix that by amending the legislations. Meantime, we also, of course, has to continue to negotiate and not least ratify the agreements we have on the table. The Mercosur agreement is really important from us at this point of stage. When we have problems doing business in one part of the world, the US now, then we have to open business in other parts of the world. Mercosur is one, Mexico is another, Indonesia, India, Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, Australia. There is a lot of possibilities, and I think possibilities to negotiate is better now than ever. So I urge you, colleagues, please do not create this trade war with Trump. We don't need it. We need security in Europe, and we need these deals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now it's the turn for Mr. Lange for 2 minutes, representing S&D Group.
Herr Vorsitzender, Herr President, Commissioner, Minister. We are not engaging in trade war. This is the point of departure for the USA. What we can see is that we've ended up in a situation where we are basically being blackmailed with the question of our security partnership. And what's quite clear is that the time of kings is gone, where kings draw up treaties without involving the people. And the time of parliaments is upon us. And Mr. Marish, we're not going to get security through this. 14 days after the conclusion of the deal, the USDA struck 407 products from the lower percentage and put it up under steel and aluminium. So we're not going to get jobs here. We've got so many more people paying the 40% trades, and that means that people are fighting for survival here. So in the Parliament, we need to take action. We need to take this opportunity in our legislation to change things while we've got this situation whereby European companies are brought into question by US trade policies. And what we need here is changes. We need amendments. We need changes to the clear link between changes in the USA and changes in the government. That needs to happen very quickly, very clearly, because there's no immobility clause. In this third year, we need to have this WTO compatible with Ms. von der Leyen talking about having a better deal than other people do, and this is good for our competitiveness. That is something that flies in the face of the WTO. We need to have our deal in a situation where people can carry on trading with us, not only in agreements that we're concluding, but also with the US deal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now it's the turn for Mr. Bay for 1 minute, representing Patriots Group.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Commissaire.
President, Commissioner, the agreement signed by Ursula von der Leyen and Donald Trump is duping us. We've conceded on all fronts. We've opened our markets to US products, and we're going to let in products that are banned in Europe. Commissioner, you've talked about stability, but how can we explain that we're giving up 3.6 billion euro in revenues? What is France getting? Wine and spirits haven't been opened on the other side. Our wine growers have been sacrificed on this altar, while the German car industry are the ones who have benefited. As President Hollande said, this also flies in the face of the WTO rules. We've given into pressure instead of defending Europe's interests. We need balanced free trade agreements that respect our sectors. We shouldn't surrender to German diktats. It's the US that has won. We have lost in Europe, and France is humiliated. And I can assure you that the National Rally will oppose this.
Thank you very much. Now it's a turn for Mr. Polato for 1 minute, representing ECR Group.
Thank you, President. The agreement with the US is a strong point to start off from. It gives stability and clarity, and that's what businesses want. The Common Declaration under points 9 to 12, here the Commission undertakes to add flexibility to directives on things such as forestation, CBAM and due diligence in the face of US companies. And that is something we've always been asking for in order to increase competitiveness in Europe. At the same time, with the trade agreement with the US, we need to look at the details of standards that hold up the EU. We need to negotiate more quickly on those negotiations that haven't finished yet, such as the GSP. Mexico, ASEAN countries, Arab countries, we need to draw up cooperation agreements with them. And finally, I would like to thank Commissioner Šefčovič for having concluded the best possible agreement given the circumstances, going for dialogue as opposed to trade wars. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mrs. Kalsbro for 1 minute and a half, representing Renew Group.
Thank you. Commissioner, Council, colleagues, there is no reason to put a lipstick on a pig. The deal with the United States is not good. It's not good for the EU, nor for the US, or for the shared security interests. It's because of Trump, who has taken the United States out of the rules-based international order and into an era of disorder and chaos. In this situation, a stronger EU is needed more than ever. But I hear colleagues from the extremes, from the left and from the right, complain that we did not get a better deal, while at the same time doing everything they can to weakening the EU. This is not serious. Our best response to strengthen is now to strengthen the single market, to say yes to more free trade agreements, to support Ukraine and to impose tougher sanctions on Russia. We must also draw a hard line when Trump attempts to interfere with legislation that is ours to decide. We can't have a situation where Donald Trump dictates the rules for the biggest tech companies operating in Europe, or how we shall protect children from addictive use and endless scrolling of social media. That is up to us to decide, no one else. When the EU speaks, it does so with the voice of 27 countries, 450 million Europeans, and the world's second largest economy. Let's use that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now it's the turn for Mrs. Schurdewan for 1 minute and a half. Brigmont, sorry. Mrs. Brigmont for 1 minute and a half, representing Greens Group.
Quelle stupeur!
I couldn't believe it this summer when I discovered the deal, this capitulation before Trump, 0% tariffs, US products, but 15% for European products. We're not going to say that it's easy. Of course not. There were a lot of meetings here in the European Parliament, but I think we were very clear. We want a united front against Trump. We knew it wasn't going to be easy to negotiate with this person, but the EU has tools that it could use, the anti-coercion tool, exactly for this kind of scenario, but also to look at U.S. services, but also to impose our rules on U.S. big tech. But no, the European Commission didn't choose this. They chose to to make sure that Trump won. This was a very asymmetrical deal. What about von der Leyen's promise this morning? She said that the EU will always take its own decisions and have its own environmental and digital standards and rules. What about these promises? Look at the deal. Trump criticizes the EU for fining Google. He criticizes for our digital rules, and then there's the whole issue of flexibility. Now, Mrs. von der Leyen also promised that we would become independent from an energy point of view during the deal, and she promised that the U.S. can invest millions in fossil fuels and so on, while this money should be invested in Europe. I think that this vision is very worrying. We're not going to accept the deal as it stands. We can't really speak about the other aspects of the deal, but yet it is Europe's democratic future that hinges on this. We fear what the far right is doing in portraying it as a savior of Europe. But look at the omnibus, look at the surrender to Trump and vis-à-vis China. And there are a lot of renationalization projects. So the EPP is unraveling Europe, and it is making us extremely vulnerable.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Brigmont, and sorry for the mistake. And now it's the turn for Mr. Shirdewan for 1 minute and a half, representing the left.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner, you have a very positive view of this trade agreement, it seems to me, and I think it would be well advised not to be deluded in this area. 15% steel, aluminium. What about US industry products? They can actually come into Europe, 0% tariffs. You know, they're being imported by us, exported by them. That clearly is an attack on our industrial fabric. And we're talking about thousands of jobs being destroyed because of this. Colleagues have already pointed this out to you, and I think you're fully aware. Now, some have said that this deal is a deal, or rather, the trade war. The trade war wasn't started by Europe, but rather by the Trump administration, that government. And yet, be that as it may, you haven't really defended yourself in this trade war. So this deal is a complete defeat. It's a defeat in terms of the trade war. 750 billion euros that will be invested, into oil, etc. 6 billion for the military industry in the USA, and so on and so forth. What about digital sovereignty, the legislation that's being passed? We're trying to do our best with DSA, DMA, etc. But look at what we're doing with Google, and look at what Trump and Trump's administration is doing. They are threatening with massive tariffs, and this is a discrimination. So that is basically what we're looking at in terms of our digital future. What about energy sovereignty? What about the protection of the environment? Commissioner, we're talking about dependence, lasting dependence on the USA. And I'm afraid, in terms of your commission, anything that you're talking about in terms of independence, I'm afraid it's not opposite. It's not actually something that reflects the reality, and we're not going to be in favour of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mr. Bausmach for 1 minute, representing the group of sovereign nations.
President, the US should be happy. You don't have to like Trump, but he has done what he said. He is dealing in the interests of his citizens. At the same time, there's Ursula von der Leyen on the other side. Had no votes in the European elections, and she dealt with dodgy vaccine deals, and she got involved with the Green Deal, which ruined the competitiveness of our industries. And for a few weeks ago, she got through a vote of no confidence here. And we've got a deal that is going to harm our economy again, with 50% tariffs on steel and aluminium. That has an impact on machinery, and German exporters are wringing their hands here. The Chamber of Commerce in Germany has said that many companies think this is terrible. So it's time for the EU Parliament to recognise that the President of the European Union is the biggest threat to European trade.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mrs. Zovko for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, before our eyes, a new world order is emerging. Authoritarian leaders are watching closely, waiting for the Western alliance to show weakness. This is why I welcome this trade agreement as a clear sign of renewed transatlantic cooperation, something that has been urgently needed at this critical moment. The European Union cannot afford to find itself on the wrong side of the history. To those colleagues who reject this agreement and call for harsher measures, I must say such positions are deeply irresponsible in these challenging times. Yes, this agreement is not perfect, but it provides stability and predictability, qualities our workers and businesses desperately need right now, and not demagogic talk. This deal must be seen as the only first step towards building a stable, balanced and fair transatlantic economy. We must strengthen our coordination to develop a unified strategy for ensuring economic security and preventing unfair competition. Only a strong, competitive and prosperous European Union, supported by powerful partners, can continue to safeguard security, stability and our shared values. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn. Well, we have a blue card. I don't know if Mrs. Sofko will want to accept it. Okay, then it's coming from Saramo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for your speech. You were the second one to say that it's not perfect. So I would like to ask, what are the good things on this Trump-von der Leyen deal?
So can I answer? What are the good things? The good things that our jobs now have predictability and stability. 15% is better than 39%, than 50% or 100% or whatever. I mean, if you didn't do the maths, that's a good thing. I mean, if you are measuring high blood pressure, going over that would be a really bad thing for our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's the turn for Mrs. Van Brent for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, President and colleagues. Can I start by saying that nobody, I guess nobody, is asking for an escalation in the trade war, especially not S&D. But that doesn't matter that this is a good deal or that the response of Europe is sufficient. And yes, I do talk to industries and workers in the industry as well. They feel the impact of these tariffs every single day. And from the very beginning, we as S&D were crystal clear. Trump tariff war is illegal, it is unfair, and it is unacceptable. And on top of that, I have to say to our EPP colleagues, unfortunately, and I say really unfortunately, it doesn't give our people and business the certainty and the stability that they need. Just look at the 407 products that were added to the 50% tariff after the deal has already been struck. Dear colleagues, we can never allow that the rule of international law is replaced by the law of the jungle. So we need solutions, and they will not come from the US, they need to come from Europe, and that requires a strong, broad and united response that we will have to work on in this Parliament. Therefore, we urge you, Commissioner, first to look to activate the anti-coercion instrument. It will make us ready to take countermeasures when necessary in the face of Trump's threats. We need to implement a sunset clause, take measures to protect our industries and strengthen the internal market. And third, we need to unite with our partners around the globe, like-minded partners, to coordinate our response to the US and to China. President von der Leyen said this morning, a new Europe must emerge, and that requires leadership and courage. It does, for our workers, our businesses, and our future. And I count on your support to do that.
Thank you very much, but we have a blue card coming from Mr. Warborn. If you will want to accept it.
Thank you for accepting the blue card. Well, you said that you don't want to initiate a trade war, and let's say it is difficult times for Europe, and the situation is not pleasant for any one of us. But you also say that you would like to use the ACI, the bazooka, the trade bazooka. Isn't that as close as you would come to respond that will lead to a trade war? And don't you think that that will make it even harder to negotiate a better deal after you initiate the ACI? And still, we know that the member states, they do not have any appetite for this.
Well, fortunately, I'm not part of the member states. Well, I'm part of a member state, but not from the Council. And I understand your question. We said from the start, in many debates we had in the INTA committee, that we wanted to activate anti-coercion. It doesn't mean that you have to use it, but then you stand ready to take much broader countermeasures than only on tariffs. You know, one of the reasons why the countermeasures on tariffs were not so effective in their making sure that it makes some impression to Trump is because in the Council there were so many exceptions. And we already, from the start, said we also have to look at not businesses, looking for the words, somebody help me. No, not companies. Of course we have to look at companies, but what I mean is services, sorry for that. To look at services, and the anti-coercion will give us the opportunity to have much more broader measures. And we can take them into account. You saw what happened exactly after this deal. Immediately Trump started to threaten us when it came to the DSA and the DMA. So we need to stand ready to make sure that when the threats go, sorry for that, President, and that's why we want to activate the anti-coercion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mrs. Gyuri for 1 minute.
Honourable members, this agreement is an agreement that really proves how vulnerable we are in the EU. Since 2008, we have been heading downwards, I'm afraid. And we also know that in terms of the Draghi report, we've only been able to complete a fraction of it. So don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if on the international stage, the EU is being held in little regard. The Commission has been clear. This was a political deal to make sure that we could have continued finance for Ukraine. So in other words, for Mrs. von der Leyen, Ukraine is more important than her own citizens, her own companies. I cannot applaud this. We're talking about exports. We used to pay like 2%, 3%. Now we're talking about 15% tariffs. I cannot support this. This is not an agreement based on reciprocity. Far from it. In addition to that, something that we haven't talked about yet is how the Commission intends to provide compensation for different sectors, such as the wine sector in the EU. You know, we're actually really handing something over to the USA, energy, etc. I think that actually July the 27th will go down in history as a date when Europe was faced with a very negative deal. Thank you.
Now is the turn for Mr. Coles for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, I guess there is a confusion. We're not talking about the EU-US trade agreement. We're talking about political deal. So there is a long way ahead to actually reach the trade deal. So, but trade in general is good, and freer trade is even better. So this principle really has underpinned decades of the EU-US cooperation. And while this new arrangement is imperfect, a deal, even a political one, is better than no deal. But we need to be serious. Tariffs are back, and they are not balanced. 15% on the most EU goods, while US exports enjoy broad exemptions. That's not a sustainable model for the world's two largest democratic economies. We welcome the political will to avoid escalation, but political will must now be followed by structure, transparency, and enforcement. Our businesses are still operating in the grey zone. legal ambiguity, regulatory inconsistency. That's not how to strengthen transatlantic supply chains, especially not in a global environment where authoritarian regimes are aggressively consolidating influence. So there are three things must be pushed for. First, a formal review mechanism with a fixed deadline. Second, a clear legal framework that gives EU exporters predictability. And third, but not last, on a roadmap, ambitious but realistic, towards a barrier-free transatlantic trade area. That's what will keep the EU-US partnership competitive, resilient and strategic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now it's the turn for Mrs. Bedren for 1 minute.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. This deal isn't a deal. It represents an ideology and a strategy. Protectionism, unilateralism. And I reject all of this as a female politician. This is everything that I fight against as a liberal politician. And I understand how difficult it is, and I understand your commitment to resisting, but let us say this, that the day after, Trump isn't going to stop here. Do we want to give Europeans the image, once again, of weak politicians? We have to think about the day after, because neither hope nor nostalgia will help us with the blackmail. So the day after, we have to bolster unity in the EU and make sure we're no longer dependent, and that we can harness ACI, the anti-coercion instrument. Intimidation and threats have no place here, and it's up to us to make our own choices and to choose our destiny.
Now is the turn for Mrs. Peter Hansen for 1 minute.
Tak. Når Trump han truer Europa, så er svar.
Thank you. Trump isn't replying, so I'm very worried to read that in this deal the European Commission promises that sustainability, human rights will not be sacrificed for the US. The sustainability rules are there to make sure that companies don't make profits because of forced labor or child labor and so on. This is what has made this is extremely important, and values are something that we have to protect. We cannot let the US dictate our own policies. We cannot allow them to put pressure on us. We're going to protect our companies. Otherwise, they will weaken, and we'll be weakening our values, and we'll be weakening our strong position that we've consolidated over decades. We have very high environmental ambitions, consumer rights, and so on. We are ambitious, and we refuse to be part of this race towards the bottom. So I appeal to the Commission to put an end to this and not give these gestures to Trump. Believe in Europe. Mr. Saramo.
Thank you, President. Europe's capitulation agreement. This is what Trump's and von der Leyen's deal is about. The United States has no moral right to demand that EU support their industry, and the Commission had no legal right to promise such a thing. Trump justifies the tariffs, saying that the USA buys more goods from Europe than it sells there. But for services, the opposite is true. And yet Trump forbids the US from taxing, as a countermeasure, the US digital giants for the profits they make here. And the right obeys humbly. Trump is the worst bully in the schoolyard. He picks on everyone in turn. Orban, Meloni and the rest of the right who wage their culture war clap their hands, even though Trump takes their pocket money too. We must not accept this. You should never give in to blackmail. The more money and support we promise to pour to the US, the more they demand from us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mr. De Masi for 1 minute.
Meine Damen und Herren.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. von der Leyen's deal is a capitulation. It will last one day, 15%, 15% for European products going into the USA, that's the tariff, and then 0% tariff for any exports from the USA to Europe. And then a couple of days later, we were talking about 50% for steel and aluminium. You know, I'm sorry, this is a complete defeat, and the Commission has brought us into a situation where we're entirely dependent on the USA. You know, you've got punitive tariffs from Trump. You've got fracking, you've got gas, you've got defense and armaments. You know, they're placing their orders, their order books are full. So this is absolutely incredible. We didn't do our best. We are the largest single market in the world. We could actually have applied tariffs to certain companies from the USA that are not paying taxation here as they should. But nobody listened to us. What about the wealth of US billionaires? Why didn't we tackle that? Gabriel Zucman, you know, and what he's been calling from the EU Tax Observatory, none of that was on the table. And at the same time, Mrs. von der Leyen agreed to $750 million for fracking gas, etc., for the USA. How can you make such a promise, such a commitment? What about investment here? This is, unfortunately, a situation where we can only argue that Mrs. von der Leyen should step down as a consequence of this deal.
Thank you very much. Mr. Zoido, for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, President. Now, what's clear here is that the agreement with the US isn't the one we would have wanted here. But as Bismarck said, politics is the art of the possible, not the desirable. The agreement reached is possibly the best of that possible under the current Trump administration. And with this, we avoid a greater shock with our main trading partner, and we have more certainty for our manufacturers. So the work done by the negotiating team needs to be seen in adverse contexts. There are deep-reaching problems that we need to try and solve. Steel and aluminium tariffs are still a threat to our industry, and our agri-food industries may well be less competitive if we don't stem the flow of US products. However, we need certainty for all sectors, and that needs to be extended temporarily. Europe can't just stick to halfway house solutions. We need to defend our own interests, and we can't leave any single sector behind.
Gracias, señor Zoido. Tiene una tarjeta.
Thank you, Mr. Zoido. You have a blue card. Do you accept it? It's Mr. Gerstedt who is using the blue card.
Okay. When we were kids, we often met the schoolyard bullies, those who came and threatened us with violence, who asked for our money or even our mobile phone. And you can take two approaches when you meet a bully.
If you can start again, sorry, because the translation was not working. Thank you very much.
Yeah. When we were kids, we sometimes met the schoolyard bullies, those who threatened us with violence, those who asked to have our money, they might even steal your phone. You can take two approaches to the bullies. You can give them what they want and humiliate yourself, and they will most likely be back the day after asking for your money again. Or you can take a stand together with others and say, no, this is not fair. What makes you think that the bully Donald Trump won't come back asking for more?
No voy a entrar en las descalificaciones.
Well, I won't get into names, name calling of people that someone that hasn't been democratically elected president of a country, but given the experience that I've had when I was young, I would have liked to have had all the support. But one thing's clear: we've reached an agreement in difficult conditions, as I said, and we need to make an effort to not leave anyone behind. Now, what we get is certainty, and it's true that businesses know what they're up against. So we will have a better situation than other nations, but there's something else that is concerning to me, which are those circumstances that would have been afoot if we hadn't had the agreement, would have been much worse, which is why we need to do everything we can and not look at what we can't do, because we need to be reasonable. And obviously, one thing is true. I've always said that humiliation is no way to lead your life. You can't do that in politics either. That it will not win you an election.
Yes, now it is on for Mr. Benifei for 2 minutes.
Trump is threatening Europe with sanctions because he doesn't like our legislation. And Mrs. von der Leyen touched upon this today. But no deal, no agreement can be based on coercion and threats. The EPP chair, Manfred Weber, said that the EU-US deal isn't something that convinces him. But I think that we have the political responsibility to tell our citizens the truth. We cannot accept the deal as it stands today. If we want to defend the interests of Europeans, we're going to work on the proposal from the Commission. We need to make sure that we can, there is a deadline and that we can renegotiate the deal. We've got to protect aluminium, steel, and any products that contain this. They are vital for our industry because we're talking about extremely punitive tariffs of 50%, and wine has to be excluded as well from these terrible tariffs. We've got a work cut out for us. Some governments, including the Italian government, has boycotted efforts by just kowtowing to the U.S. administration. We've got to open up new trade routes for Europe. We need to bolster our domestic economies, and we need to have a balanced transatlantic relationship based on respect. We will continue work in a constructive way, but we will stand firm with one sole objective: the interest of our citizens, the interest of our workers, the interest of our companies. We will defend principles without which the world becomes a dangerous arena that is completely lawless. And we cannot afford this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mr. Christopans for 1 minute.
Chairman, dear colleagues, our factories are threatened and our farmers have been left on their own, and we will pay the price of this deal, which was secretly concluded. Ursula von der Leyen calls it a success, this deal between Europe and the United States, but actually it is a compromise without justice and its betrayal of Europe, without a mandate. Now it's more advantageous for the entrepreneurs to open factories in the United States than here in Europe, and that means loss of jobs, lost tax revenues, and our future. Not only the opposition objects to this deal, it has been criticized also by the representatives of the government, the leaders in manufacturing, and also a part of the largest political groups in this parliament. Europe is strong, our market is huge, yet we got only breadcrumbs. This is not a strategy, this is capitulation. If the President of the Commission doesn't understand, then we have to say, Ursula von der Leyen, your time is up, do resign.
Now is the turn for Mr.
Un tagad Tarsinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear leftists, you've been attacking President Trump for years. Now you are whining about tariffs. You are not happy that he doesn't want to be your private bodyguard. But it's not Trump's decision to spend money on illegal migrants instead of army or industry. It's not Trump's fault that you restricted European industry because of your green god and because of your sick ideology. It's not his fault. It's time to be a man. It's time to take care of yourself. It's time to stop wearing dresses and be a man. Put on an armor, not a dress. And your laughter will not change the fact that this is your fault. This is your fault. You destroyed and make Europe weak. So be a man. Be strong. Be brave. Be like Poland, because you're not going to laugh in a minute. Russian drones are flying over Poland, and what you're doing, you're having another discussion about helping migrants, and you're laughing. You're not going to laugh for long. That is the problem. You do not understand your position. So stop attacking us, because we are the force in Europe to save Europe, to restore Europe. We are the brave ones. and you've got only laughter because you are safe here in this building, in this parliament. Over 1 million people will take streets of London this Saturday, and you will see the unity, you will see the strength of the patriots. Be brave, be like Poland. Thank you.
I will remind to the speaker that has to respect the European values here, and we will discuss another day about what it's to be a man here in the European Parliament. We can continue with Mrs. Hang for 1 minute.
Well, dear colleagues, sometimes you think, how do you counter this misogyny? And then you think, maybe just continue and show them how strong women are in this house. Liebe Kollegen,
Dear colleagues, the deal with the USA is a bad deal. Mrs. von der Leyen wasn't brave enough to negotiate harder because we are so dependent politically, economically from the USA. So Europe was faced with a choice, either no deal or a bad deal. I think Europe should pull itself together. We should pull ourselves together and really sit at the negotiating table on an international stage, because we have to have geopolitical relevance and we need to fight for this and fight for it through trade. Mrs. von der Leyen really should be looking at economic growth and really emphasise that, not what she's done. When it comes to European subsidies, we're told that there will be something on the horizon, but unfortunately, so far, not much to see. So, if you are making our economy weaker, you are making Europe weaker. Without growth, we become irrelevant. You've got the Mercosur agreement, bad for jobs. We're only going to be strong in the world if we have more trade and if we have more partners. So let's take this opportunity. And I'm also turning to the Danish presidency of Council. Please make sure that we get this agreement, a good agreement, soon.
Ahora es el turno para el señor Marsá.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marcé Bañez, 1 minute.
Señor Comisario.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. Come here. Now, we're not just looking back at those who have said no from the start, but those who are trying to get out of the agreement. So we need to think about whether the only people that are happy here about this agreement and are defending it up to the hilt are those pro-Trumpists here. That's something we've just seen. The only people that are happy here are Trump's acolytes in Europe. So we need to think hard, not just because it's humiliating and there's a lack of equality, but because there is no stability as a result. The only people defending this are saying it will give stability. 2 weeks down the road, we've got these tariffs on aluminium. 1 month later, we'll have more tariffs because American companies that don't go along with the legislation that we've given them have been penalised. So what stability are we seeing here? If just a month down the line we're saying that it will not be adhered to, how are we moving ahead with WTO rules? And because this is our moment, it's Europe's moment. If we carry on stuck to our values, anchored in our values, standing together, we need to stop dealing with people who blackmail us and don't stick to the agreements.
Gracias. Ahora es el turno para el señor Barrena.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barrena, 1 minute. Thank you very much, President. European citizens still feel shame when we look at what happened on the 27th of July and Mrs. von der Leyen met Trump. You accepted this 15% tariffs, but committed to millions in euro of investment that will favor the US. The image that you left for posterity is that of someone kowtowing to the US president. This is the tragic image of the end of the EU strategic autonomy, and it also throws a spanner in the European integration project. Social cuts to continue buying weapons from the US, and this means that the EU will become the accomplice, the necessary accomplice of the genocide. And the EU, as a global player, no longer has any clout. Mrs. von der Leyen, you are becoming an openly anti-European Commission President. Next time, we might have to speak to Donald Trump because he's already boasting that he is the President of Europe.
It's a turn for Mrs. Cartaser for 1 minute.
Monsieur le Président. Thank you, President. Commissioner, this topic should be called really the US tariff diktat. The Commission didn't even negotiate to try to defend European trade interests. All they wanted to do was continue with the war in Ukraine and to get the support of the USA. That's all it cared about, and that's why it caved in terms of the key demands made by the US. Why do we need a European Commission under those circumstances, you may ask? We have to put an end to the politicisation of customs barriers and tariffs. We need to really talk about trade policy as trade policy. Any attempt to try to impose political sanctions using trade or customs duties should be set aside. Similarly, the Commission shouldn't try to include the censorship of social media when this has extraterritorial effect when it comes to trade agreements reached with third parties. Quite the opposite. Censorship, in terms of digital services, digital markets, should be done away with. The Commission has done the opposite of what would be deemed reasonable. The Commission should have stood firm when it comes to customs tariffs, and it should also have made sure that it guaranteed freedom of expression in these negotiations with the USA.
Now is the turn for Mr. Serva for 1 minute.
Panie komisarzu,
Commissioner, the trade agreement with the US is not ideal. However, the conditions are as they are, so it's probably the best possible solution. However, today has shown very clearly that the foundation for our transatlantic relations is security and safety. The Polish airspace was attacked 19 times. It was no accident. Who was responsible? It's the terrorist state run by Putin. It's an unprecedented attack on Poland, a NATO member, an EU member. NATO forces have been mobilized. One of the American units is stationed in Wask. A drone flew over 60 kilometers away from this place. So today we need allies. We need to strengthen our defense systems. As Poland, as a border country, we need patriots. And we ask you for your solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Galvez.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, the President of the Commission has said today that the EU needs to carry on being free and independent. But this trade agreement with the US won't help that. We, the Socialists, are very much aware of how important it is to avoid trade war, and we will work to improve the agreement, of course, but we don't believe that having asymmetric conditions will avoid this or guarantee stability or security, as we've seen 11 days down the line with 407 articles with new tariffs. We may well see economic contraction, which will lead to a political reaction that destabilizes economic forces in Europe, and that may be what Trump wants. So we can't see a situation where we have our legislation watered down that's important for our autonomy. We need to stand together and stand against coercion, particularly looking at technology, farming, and other key industries. And we have the resources to do this. We have economic weight, regulatory influence, and trade tools at our disposal. So yeah, let's use them. Let's defend the multilateral system, the rules-based system. Our sovereignty, our jobs are at stake here, and we need to strengthen trade agreements with our partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mr. Annemans for 1 minute.
Voorzitter, collega's, er moet absoluut geen enkele twijfel over.
President, there is no doubt about the fact outside the European Parliament bubble, it's been a while that Mrs. von der Leyen would have disappeared. The European Commission is a conglomerate of interests, and this deal with Trump is undoubtedly the cherry on top of what has occurred over the last 5 years. Our trade policy is something that the EU has been dealing with, but we haven't done it properly. We have made so many concessions, and I think that is the wrong approach. As Trump said, he is thinking of his own interests, but Mrs. von der Leyen isn't thinking of our interests. It is Europe's problem.
Mr. Eriksson, for 1 minute.
We need to remember that at the beginning of this year, it was the European Union that actually had higher tariffs vis-à-vis the USA for cars or for agricultural products, important areas. Now, the new US administration responded to that, of course, reacted to that with its own form of protectionism. And under these circumstances, as far as I'm concerned, what this means is that we need to basically praise the Commission, praise them for having reached an agreement with the USA. There is now a deal with the USA, even though I personally would have preferred to see 0% tariffs both ways, both sides. The Commission should not stoop low, should not actually act childishly vis-à-vis the United States of America, and it did not do so. You know, trade is far too important. We want to maintain our prestige, and therefore let us continue to work towards lower tariffs, but let's also be realistic and let's take responsibility for actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mr. Grotwitz for 1 minute.
Thank you, dear Chair, dear Commissioner, Council. As markets outside Europe is increasingly closing for our entrepreneurs, I would like to ask the Commission to open up new markets for our businesses, finish new trade deals fast. But trade negotiations with the Gulf region have dragged on for 34 years. India, 18 years, Latin America, 26 years and counting, Malaysia, 15 years, etc. It's too slow for this geopolitical storm. The problem is that by overloading trade agreements with additional demands on human rights, environmental or political conditions, we are stopping crucial trade deals from ever reaching the finish line. And as an extra result, ratification is too slow. And let's just stop the translation of each concept trade agreement into 24 different languages. It's used as an excuse for delay. Commissioner, your excellent team in Brussels should become a lean, mean fighting machine. We need to reform faster than markets around us are closing, and reform starts here at home, and you have our support in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mrs. Gregorova for 1 minute.
Colleagues, the Commission promised to President Trump more than €1 trillion in purchases and investments into the US, without any binding nature, any way to measure them, and without even distinguishing them from plans already in place. What happened on July 27 was presented to the public as necessary damage control, and to me as an MEP as a hidden win for European industry, because we supposedly avoided 30% tariffs. In truth, it was little more than performative politics. It was a petty shakedown by a hostile American administration, and the costs should haunt the US for years. We can play the same game. We can fairly tax US digital monopolies and support our own digital champions. We can stop relying on US weapons and build our own military capacity. And the US undermines its global trade and monetary role. And in that case, we shall be ready to step in when the dollar falters. Otherwise, what are we really expecting from giving the bully our lunch every day? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mr. Josted for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Thank you, President. This deal is a disappointment, and it is also a betrayal of European workers, European businesses, companies. USA is getting all the advantages, and Europe is just faced with all the disadvantages. It's capitulation, in essence. It's also a betrayal when it comes to our global work on the climate. The EU is supposed to buy energy now from the United States of America. Billions of dollars. We're talking about oil and gas, fossil fuels. A lot of it, of course, the produce of fracking. Fracking is one of the most dangerous environmental practices that we have right now. So major pollution, large-scale pollution, but also greenhouse gas emissions increasing enormously. So it really is a sizable increase in the import of dirty energy. It's a kind of reward for Donald Trump, who withdrew from the Paris Agreement. We shouldn't be doing this. No, we should be strengthening our global work on the environment, and we should not be importing dirty energy sources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mr. Gaetzel for 1 minute.
President, Commissioner, colleagues, it's already been pointed out several times that Ursula von der Leyen and Donald Trump's customs deal is unbalanced and seriously harms European interests. What's worse, I think, is that the President of the Commission has made promises that are not only absurd in terms of content, but she can't keep them. If she promises to the US President that the EU will buy 750 billion euros of oil and gas from America over the next 3 years, that would mean that we would be fully dependent on expensive fracked American LNG gas. But she wasn't able to promise this anyway because it doesn't come from the EU budget. And I can't see European energy companies being stupid enough to only buy American gas. In this respect, breach of contracts is a foregone conclusion, and Donald Trump will use it to blackmail us again. Ms. von der Leyen, please stand down. You're not fit for the job.
Thank you very much. Ahora es el turno para el señor Jiménez por 1 minuto.
Mr. Jiménez, 1 minute.
Gracias, presidente. La fuerza de Europa.
Thank you. The strength of Europe lies in its trade union, and we have to take decisions. The deal with the US has avoided a trade war that wouldn't have benefited anyone, but we mustn't be complacent. The deal does raise questions, and we cannot sweep them under the carpet. The US is a vital ally, but it is unpredictable, and that makes it difficult for us. We have to open up new markets. It's not an option. It is a strategic need. And there is one region that is particularly interesting. That's Ibero-America, because of historic ties, our language ties, and so on, where we need to project ourselves towards the future. The EU, Mercosur, and Mexico agreements need to become a reality. There is protectionism, countries closing in on themselves, and we have to fly the flag of free trade, not only for us, but also for the prosperity of all Europeans and our businesses. Thank you.
Mr. Glucksmann for 1 minute.
Merci.
Thank you. Commissioner, let's be blunt here. Let's be frank. You accepted a profoundly unfair deal against the illusion of a promise of stability and security. I'm afraid very quickly you will be disillusioned. The President of the Commission went to Scotland. Trump took the opportunity to humiliate her and humiliate us by the same token. Let's never forget that we are the biggest market, the first market in the world. We have the means. We have the means to negotiate properly with the USA. Nobody wants a trade war. But if you don't actually fight your corner, then you're basically paving the way for further blackmail on the part of Trump. And it means that our principles will be held in disregard. So let's wake up. Trump is not going to help us, not with Ukraine, not with anything. He's just going to walk all over us if we let him. Therefore, the only way of gaining respect, the only way of building our strength, our power, would be to believe in our own force, our own strength. If you're just trying to kowtow to an adversary, they will see that as a sign of weakness, and Trump cannot take weakness.
Now it's a turn for Mr. Casard for 1 minute.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur...
President, Commissioner, The European Union is on its knees. It's given in to Donald Trump. This is undeniable, but there's absolutely no point crying over spilt milk. Instead, I think we should ask ourselves why, and even more importantly, let us learn a lesson from this. How can we negotiate on an equal footing with Washington or Beijing when we need them to protect our borders, heat our homes, and make sure that our factories keep running? Our strategic dependence means that we are prey, and you want to sign an agreement with Mercosur with no mirror clause, and that will threaten our food sovereignty. Food is a geopolitical weapon. Ukraine has illustrated this, and Gaza is a cruel reminder every day. To continue signing free trade agreements that aren't balanced and sacrificing our agriculture on the altar of this is a serious and irreversible political error. Thank you.
Now it's the turn for Mrs. Vieira for 1 minute.
Dear Chair, dear Commissioner, you and our colleagues from the EPP called for political responsibility in supporting this deal. But I think it's very far-fetched to claim that it is responsible for us to spend $750 billion on natural gas, oil, and nuclear energy from the US. If Russia has taught us something, is that Europe must become independent in its energy production through a green transition by no longer depending on others, and especially not on unpredictable populists and dictators. But looking at this deal with the US, it seems perhaps we have not learned our lesson. Let's face it, Commissioner Šefčovič, these billions are needed here in Europe to benefit European consumers and companies, not to fill the coffers of ExxonMobil and Chevron, the same corporations that have blocked ambitious climate action for decades. Instead of pouring money into fossil fuels, we must invest in renewable energy production, in batteries, in the circular economy. Our regulation, our climate goals, our values, they are not for sale, and we cannot, we cannot trade them away. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mrs. Imart for 1 minute.
Monsieur le Commissaire, le 27 juillet dernier,
On the 27th of July, the President of the Commission got into a golf match which was basically an unbalanced trade deal. 15% for our exports, nothing for the US. Now I'm looking at the complexity of this. I know that our American partner is unpredictable. I know that our businesses need clarity and stability. But Europe has been trodden upon. The EP has been left to one side. The agreement was concluded in opaque conditions. We have capitulated. The promise of 200 billion euros on US soil, AI, and so on, without the promise of military support. We're looking at reindustrialization of the US, and we're contributing to that, sacrificing our sovereignty. Commissioner, to carry on with these negotiations, to defend and safeguard our interests, if the negotiations are impossible, do you have tools to fight, such as the anti-coercion tools that we've got? Because Europe is an economic giant. This is a disaster, and we are a political dwarf.
Now is the turn for Mr. Pizzula for 1 minute.
Hvala lijepo. Ovo je nažalost za Europu bilo ljeto neiskorištenih prilika kada je riječ o odnosu.
Thank you. This is an opportunity for Europe in terms of our relations with the USA. We're exporting more to the USA. I mean, so far, our trade relationship with the USA, so far, it was balanced. Whereas with the new agreement, we really have no guarantees anymore. Trump really imposed his program upon us, deregulation, customs tariffs, and what have you. The European Union is stuck. We're blocked because we don't seem to be able to agree. And that is why we're not in the lead on this issue. And the consequences could be disastrous. We should actually take responsibility for our own security, take that over. And also energy production should be our own affair. That would strengthen our position. We should defend jobs, protect our competitiveness, Our autonomy should be strengthened as well. And most importantly, perhaps, European legislation. The European Union is a global symbol of values, of ecological standards. The European Union is, furthermore, the largest market in the world, and we should therefore work together to overcome these problems.
Altola has the floor for 1 minute.
Mr. President, dear Commissioner, at first glance, the new US-EU trade deal seems to be absurd, but it buys us something urgently needed: predictability. Without it, Europe faced tariffs up to 30% and loss of millions of jobs. Now, with average rate below 15%, we bought time, not comfort, but breathing space, and transatlantic geoeconomic stability that has also important geopolitical ramifications. Yet, let's be clear, the deal is a fragile one. President Trump's unpredictability makes it temporary at best. This means acting now. Times are difficult. We must turn today's instability into tomorrow's power. It is about Europe's place in a world where power, not rules, unfortunately, increasingly sets the terms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mr. Negrescu for 1 minute.
Dear Commissioner, the EU needs the friendship and democratic influence of the US as much as the United States needs a powerful and united Europe. The recent summit of authoritarian leaders has shown us that we have countries seeking to change the current global status quo, to strengthen our way of life and to challenge our democratic model. Divided, we are clearly weaker. United, but really united, we can protect our citizens. And in order to do so, we need to be fair partners and respect our democratic rules. I support the need for a deal and the work done by you, Commissioner. I can even accept the request for Europe to invest more in defense, but I have difficulties in accepting some of the imbalances in the agreement, in particular related to agriculture and our industry, but also the lack of consultation of the Parliament and of the business sector. This is Europe. We are not perfect, but we love our democratic imperfections and stand strong for our values. It is normal for the Parliament to scrutinize the agreement, but we stand strong and firm in supporting anything that can help us improve the text without jeopardizing the deal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now it's the turn of the Catch the Eye. We have several, but we will accept them all. First of all, Mrs. Carberry has the floor.
This week, the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council warned that our drinks and spirits sector is uniquely exposed to tariffs. Bowen Distilleries in Boyne Valley only entered the US market in February of this year. The Shed Distillery in Leitrim is another example of an Irish SME that has rooted itself in the US market. For them, the long-term threats are the hardest to measure. With the future of Trump's tariffs now before the US Supreme Court, we must be ready to re-engage. Commissioner, this threat also means new EU supports must be made available for exporters, supports that open new markets, help SMEs diversify and help funding in the next EU budget. We must also recognise the knock-on effect tariffs in the whisky sector have on the agri-food supply chain in tillage especially. And finally, as Parliament's rapporteur on the UK relations, a word of caution. Tariff divergence on the island of Ireland risks complicating the Windsor framework. We cannot allow that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mrs. Grappini for 1 minute.
Domnule comisar, stimați colegi.
Commissioner, dear colleagues, the outcome of a negotiation, political or commercial agreement, depends on the power that you have when you negotiate, and it depends on your courage and it depends on your skill. But let's face it, that was the power that the EU wielded at the time. Our strength has been decreasing with every year that went by. We need the agreement with the US. We cannot disregard such a market. The European industry, the European agriculture, they need this agreement. Of course, maybe nobody here is happy with it, but consider the alternative. What happens if we don't have an agreement? Let me state it clearly. If you've never negotiated a contract, maybe it's hard for you to understand, but the lesser party in a negotiation will never prevail. True, but we do have some instruments that we can wield against Trump and bring us to a win-win situation. We have taken a first step, and I have full confidence, Commissioner, that we'll be able to improve this agreement as time goes by. We need it. Let's see how we can improve it. Our farmers, our agriculture, our wine producers, our industry need access to that market on equal terms, similar standards, mutually equal access to the market. Thank you.
Ahora es el turno para el señor Millán Mon por un minuto.
Mr. Milan Mon, 1 minute. The recent EU-US deal, even if not perfect, is a step forward, and it's better to the absence of a common framework or a trade war. I'm thinking about the 50% tariff slapped on India or the 39% slapped on Switzerland. It isn't easy to negotiate with the Trump administration, but we also have to take into account the security and defense dimension that brings us together. It ties us to the US at these very difficult moments. There's no doubt about the fact that the deal falls short of our expectations. It is also pretty limited and restricted, but I think it gives some certainty to our companies in the face of volatility. The Commission has to continue negotiating to get a better tariff deal for sectors that have been greatly affected, olive oil and wine. Now, what kind of deadlines are we talking about for these impending negotiations? We also must bear in mind that our exports have also been harmed greatly by the current dollar devaluation. So we have very high tariffs on steel and aluminium, twice as much as those for the UK. Why is this, and what's going to happen to our products? We also have to diversify our economic relations. I'm thinking of Mexico and Mercosur, and we also have to bolster our internal market.
The turn for Mr. Sipper for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Dobry dzień, Pan Kommissar. I hope I pronounced this right. Taka Mameto. Now this is our situation that we have to deal with. This House has said it already, no one is happy, and I don't think that we can change anything with that now, but we have to learn something for the future, while we now have to stand together implementing this. I think the very first lesson is how to deal with bullies, not to give in. And if I may suggest this for the next time that we find ourselves in a situation like this, Mr. Commissioner, we should impose countermeasures already while negotiating this deal. And the second lesson that we take is that we are not seen as weak in that sense. The European Commission should take more effort into actually communicating the efforts that have been made with the public to convince them that this was not just the best that we could get, but actually something good for Europe. Thank you very much for your work. Thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for Mr. Sokol.
Hvala lijepa. Ovaj takozvani sporazum je generalno jednostran,
This so-called deal is a one-sided deal. It's not balanced. However, there are some positive elements within it when it comes to generics, medicines. That's been covered, but really it is a detail. We have 450 million consumers in Europe, and we have a deficit when it comes to products, when it comes to services. We haven't really done very much productive during these negotiations. We got some guarantees, but I'm afraid they're not safe guarantees, and we haven't received certainty. The US side is now putting pressure on us. They're putting pressure on us when it comes to digital corporations and asking us to change our measures. It was predictable, really. New partnerships with Japan, Canada, Australia, countries of Latin America. This is what we're now talking about again, and we need to make sure that our interests are protected in these talks. We also need to insist on reciprocity in these agreements, and we need to strengthen our European industry. That's the only way of achieving a strong Europe for our citizens and our companies.
Thank you very much. Now is the turn for our Commissioner, Mr. Šefčovič. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President, honourable members. I was listening to you very, very carefully this morning and also, of course, now this afternoon. And I was just trying to imagine how our debate would look like if it would be in a full trade war. I'm sure I would not get any praise from you for hundreds of jobs lost, billions of euros of investment disappeared, and thousands of SMEs gone bust. And I know that many of you would criticize me for failed negotiations and economic catastrophe brought to Europe. And therefore, allow me a personal remark that I'm always surprised how we always manage in Europe to talk ourselves and Europe down. We got the best deal in the world with the US, which was extremely difficult, and we got this harsh treatment. Ask the countries who got to the agreement with the US and ask those who didn't if they wouldn't trade the place with us. And show me one who wouldn't. Show me one who wouldn't. And therefore, if you allow me just to run through some of the figures which have been quoted so widely this afternoon. Our estimation after this deal was reached, and we compared it to the situation with other countries having or not having the deal. The fact is that the impact on the trade because of our relative stronger position than other partners would be negligible. And I will be very happy, and I did it with many of you, to share these figures. So please, let's talk figures and not only emotions. Our agri-food industry is and will remain competitive. We export 30 billion of euros to the United States. We import 11 billion from the United States. Our concessions being given on non-sensitive products. Again, compare these results with some other deals which have been achieved. On top of it, we export high-value products and we import the products we need, like soybeans, animal feed, and so on and so forth. So absolutely convinced that our agri-food sector will stay competitive also with this deal. I just gave you, in many meetings I had yesterday with the honourable members of the Parliament who are interested in trade and in US, comparison with the tariffs on cheese. The MFN before the deal was 14.9%. After the deal, because we have a shield of all-inclusive 15%, it's 15%. How is it in other countries? Because they do not have this non-stacking rule. So it's 49% plus the reciprocal tariffs. So in the case of some of our neighbors, it's much, much higher. I do not want to kind of show our advantages with other countries because it's not fair, and I know that they've been doing their best in negotiations, and we are partners and friends with them. But I just want to tell you this reality. Compare, please, the figures. Then I hear a lot of criticism about industrial products. Again, let's look at the numbers. Already now, 67% of US industrial exports to the EU tariffs were tariff-free. So what we are talking here is 33%. We are talking in nominal value in billions of euros. Billions. Much less than 10. And the exports to the EU is around 360 billion. Again, look at the figure. Compare the fact, and please, please, please be fair to us. EU has the best tariff compared to everyone else. And therefore, as I said, this is faring very favorably with others. On top of it, we got the exemptions, we got the key sectors capped at 15%, and most important, we secured also some agenda for the future. I totally agree with Mr. Lange and with all of you who are unhappy about the derivatives. I totally agree with Brando Benifei that we need to work on steel, and we will. And it's reflected in the joint statement that we will be working on the ring of partners to protect our steel industry. We didn't make it, on the 27th of July, but it's on the agenda, and you have it reflected that it's one of the things which we will be working on together. And of course, I'm in touch with Secretary Latnik on derivatives. Of course, we are highlighting which customs codes should be looked at and upon which we should negotiate. And same goes for wine. Same goes for beer. Same goes for spirits. But you think that we would be better off, we would be in a full trade war with the US to get these negotiations ongoing? You think that we would have such a constructive discussions as we have with them on many geopolitical issues? We've been discussing this morning what happened yesterday in Poland. Just imagine what would be the alternative. If you allow some concrete suggestions, as I said, and I think this was raised by my dear colleagues, Mr. Lange and Benifei, on the process ahead. As I said, the Commission is ready to work with you and support Parliament in the legislative process. And I'm sure that we can work together on a constructive solution. But I would just have a plea. Let's be reasonable, let's be responsible, and let's work in a way that we would not unravel the deal, which I said is best in the world, even though I know many of you do not like it. And I agree it could be improved, but let's do it in a way which would help European businesses, European citizens, and European economy. To my dear colleague, Mr. Warborn, we've been discussing it already together, but I think it has to be also said here publicly and officially. We believe that the agreement and the joint statement as it was struck is compatible with the WTO, because we look at it as a first phased agreement and we want to proceed our negotiations to further expand trade. And if you look at it from our perspective, EU already covers substantially all trade. And of course, we would work with the US to further expand. On top of it, I am in almost daily contact with Dr. Ngozi, Director General of the WTO. And she knows, and you know it as well, that we want to reform the WTO, that we need to reform the WTO. For the sake of the WTO, for the sake of trade multilateralism, we have to reform WTO. Otherwise, the future of this organization would be very, very dire. And we are working with her, and we are working with our partners to achieve that. I would like to thank all of you who support the point of diversification of our free trade agenda, because if we would achieve all what I was describing to you in the introductory remarks, this was already replaced like 3/4 of the current trade with the EU. And let me also conclude, Mr. President, by addressing some of the repeated claims which have been also voiced here and which I categorically reject. The first one is that there were no negotiations. Only the person who was not in the room can say something like that. Because there have been hundreds of hours of negotiations from the moment one until the last minute in Scotland, and after that to make sure that the joint statement would be properly drafted, properly formulated, and we discussed with our American partners every single executive order and all the annexes which are being published there. So it's continuous work. So if somebody says there was no negotiation, that's simply not true. Then we've been discussing a lot anti-coercion instrument and the countermeasures. And I know that several of you have been calling for it. Of course, we discussed it with member states. Formally as 27, but especially in a very confidential mode where we've been talking to one by one of our member states. And I can tell you there were no appetite for this at all. Because the member states know in what kind of situations are we. They prefer agreement, they prefer jobs, they prefer economic development, and they prefer the stability as much as we can get it at this very difficult stage. Questions on energy and energy security. You would recall that 2 or 3 years ago, I was asked to organize common purchase of gas. Because at that time we paid for megawatt hour more than 1,000 euros in some parts of Europe. And I can tell you it was a pretty difficult job. I was crisscrossing the world looking for the gas to make sure that our lights and our electricity would be on. Now we're completely phasing out the Russian supplies. So we need gas, we need oil, we need nuclear fuel, which is new. We need AI chips. And what we put on the table was based on a thorough analysis of DG Ener. So again, I think that here we've been behaving responsibly. And of course, this would be private contracts, but I think we are creating a frame for much stronger energy security than what we would have otherwise. If you allow me the last remark, and to conclude by reference to Mr. Grotius, because I totally agree with him. We need to be faster in negotiating and ratifying our free trade agreements. We have to focus much more on the new market access for our businesses and for our economy. Just this year, we brought to your table Mercosur, Mexico, and I hope very soon we'll bring to you Indonesia. This is on top of it, of making sure that we resolve our issues with Switzerland, that we resolve our issues with our UK friends, and that it works very well. Now, I believe that with the US, we managed to de-escalate, we managed to stabilize the relationship, and I think, to be honest, let's be confident enough that we can push our trade agenda with the US further, that we can defend our values, we can defend our laws. I'm pretty sure that we can do it, and I believe that to have it in the atmosphere of partnership and trade cooperation, it's much better than if you do it otherwise. Mr. President, thank you very much for being generous with my time, but we had a long day, and this was a topic which was heavily discussed in the morning and in the afternoon. And I understand the passion, I understand the interest, and I know that all of us want to do the best for Europe, for European citizens, and for our economy. And I appreciate all the remarks. I'm ready to work, as I was until now, with every single member of this chamber to make sure that we deliver best possible results for Europe and its citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your words and your efforts. And now it's a turn for the Council, Mrs. Biag.
Thank you. President, honourable members and Commissioner. I have now, as a representative of the Council, followed quite some debates in here, and I have noticed strong opinions, but I have to say this is the first time that I heard completely consensus, from left to centre to right. And I agree with you. Yes, the trade agreement is unbalanced. As both Mr. Warborn and Mr. Lange from S&D said, it is not perfect. But it is the best result. The alternative would be worse, as Mrs. Grappini from S&D just said. We need the agreement. I also agree with Mrs. Karlsbro from Renew, who said the best response is to strengthen Europe. We should improve our internal market, make Europe more competitive and capable of defending itself. Also, there is a point made by Commissioner Šefčovič I want to echo. The trade with the US is only 17% of the world's trade. Now it is time to embrace the other 83% of the world's trade, making new partnership trade agreements. We in the Council remain committed to making the best of the understanding reached with the US. We want to continue the work to help our industry, improve competitiveness and support economic growth in the EU. The Danish presidency will support the work on the two proposals in the Council. We hope to reach an outcome that brings benefit to our businesses and to our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Colleagues, we are closing the debate on this point in agenda. And nākamais darba kārtības punkts, kolēģi, ir... and sorry, and debate will be debate is closed. Yeah, everything is fine. So sorry.
I think.
Punkts komisijas paziņojums Ķīnas nepamatotais lēmums.
The next item on the agenda is import duties by China and the necessity to support European farmers and workers.
Ready to take the floor. Floor is yours.
Dear Chair, dear colleagues, again I would like to present Commission position on this very important issue.